Greetings once again. It's a pleasure to be back. And in this particular video for today, it's been inspired by a conversation that I had over the week. And I'm going to talk about how do we leapfrog development in the pharmaceutical industry. When you look at it from that standpoint, then you need to be asking yourself, what kind of development are we talking about in the pharmaceutical industry? What are the shortfalls that we're having in the pharmaceutical industry? So with that kind of a background, then the question, knowing what kind of development we need to be thinking about, what are the current drawbacks, actually what are the current bottlenecks and the challenges that we're contending with to ensure that kind of development can be realized. Then other than that, then now we need to move to the key motivators and the key drivers that can ensure that we actually leapfrog this development and see and harness the possibilities and realize the potential that exists in the industry. So since last year, around February, March, I started doing these videos and sharing insights about different topics and different areas. The last one that I did was around artificial intelligence, open artificial intelligence, that is ChatGPT and all that kind of possibilities, and what kind of opportunities were coming there for us as pharmaceutical industry professionals and generally professionals in whichever area of line that we're working in. That was a good starting point for us. Then following that conversation, then this week I had an opportunity to meet my mentor, and some of the discussions looking at it from a regulatory policy and intelligence perspective, because that is my interest area within the pharma industry and the policy space. So how do we harness these possibilities? What are the potential possibilities? What are the drawbacks? What are the challenges that we're contending with? So in some of the conversation that we were having, ranging from diversity, equity and inclusion in the pharma industry, access to essential medicine to those who need them, clinical trial deficiencies and inadequacies that we're dealing with. There's so many problems, and these problems being there, it means somebody took the work and actually did the work to find what problems are we contending with. And I reflected on my videos in terms of what I've done over the years, because I've been presenting perspectives and insights on how you as a professional can venture into any of those particular lines, what kind of gaps exist, and how you position yourself to resolve those gaps and move to the next frontiers and be a successful professional, but at the same time create meaningful value and contribution to the ecosystem. And that is all we all wish for. So in that conversation, as we were having this chat, one of the key things that came out is I'll give it a basis in terms of what we're talking about from clinical trials. And in terms of clinical trials, one of the key bit on the reflections from COVID-19 as a world, as a general population, especially from the marginalized backgrounds, we look at it from the black and the minorities in the developed countries, the US or all that. Then we look at it from an African standpoint where we're saying there's little or almost zero development work in terms of research and development that has been happening in Africa. On that note, then you need to ask yourself, do these minorities still have need for pharmaceutical services and products? The answer is definitely yes. So acknowledging that there's need for pharmaceutical services and products in all these countries and these regions, even the minorities, then you look at it from the clinical trials as I was talking about, what are the gaps that we've been having? In COVID-19, we were having conversation where people are talking about the data does not reflect a particular population, and therefore we're not sure whether this efficacy and the safety of these particular products are going to be confirmed and verified in this population. That was a valid argument. But at the same time, on the very background of that kind of conversation, as people who were supposed to be conducting those trials and actually who were to be used as participants, as subjects in these trials, there was that some kind of pushback in the sense that people were resisting because they felt like they were being used as guinea pigs, in quotes. So if that is the kind of dynamics that we're dealing with, it means we're not going to conduct clinical trials in our settings, in the minorities, because of that kind of negative connotation that comes with them. But on the other end, we are the very people who will be saying how things are not working and something needs to be done. The question is, what needs to be done, who needs to do it, and how do we move from the current situation to the next frontier? Because whether we have the trials done in our environment or not, we will need the medical products and services. We'll need the new innovative molecules. So how do we generate that information? So reflecting on that clinical trial perspective from the data that we're talking about, the real world evidence that I presented on last week, but one, when talking about real world evidence, using clinical case examples, we are still using the medicines. Why don't we then generate evidence from the use? And those are some of the challenges that we need to put ourselves out there and ask ourselves, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? And what are the next frontiers in terms of that development and investment in the pharmaceutical industry? So when I look at all those possibilities, one key thing that is clear is the fact that we've identified the problems, we know them, we know the solution that need to be there, and actually some of the cases that we're presenting is about what can be done and how it can be done better. So we already even have a roadmap and perspective and official framework that can be implemented to help us move from where we are in the problem to the solution zone. So if we know where the problems are, we developed a blueprint and actually a roadmap on how to achieve them, and we have perspectives and insights, then why are we not doing the work? And that is a critical conversation to have. One of the reasons that we're not having solutions being presented and actually being developed is one, there is the people who are benefiting from these kind of inadequacies and inefficiencies in the system. And therefore, we will keep talking about what the inefficiencies are, what the deficits are, but the reality is, we beyond talking, we are not implementing solutions. We need pragmatic solutions that are going to move us from talking and presenting problems and challenges to getting solutions, implementing them, and optimizing as we move around the journey. So the people who've been benefiting probably are holding back, or rather are not willing to move to the next thing. So that is one challenge that we're dealing with. Other than that, we have the victim mentality. And this is specifically when we're looking at it from the marginalized communities, all that. We know that inefficiencies that have been there, the discrimination that has existed, those are the marginalization. It is a fact of life. There's people who are marginalized, there are people who are not marginalized. How do we overcome that? By the people who are marginalized taking up leadership and saying, we are going to rewrite our story. And we're going to rewrite that story by doing ethical research. Because one of the key bits that the pushback we're having now, let's say for example from the clinical trial that I presented, is that we fear that somebody is using our minority populations, as well as black people. We're being used in clinical trials, and at the same time, probably they're not as safe. The clinical endpoints are not contextualized to our environment. The research protocols are not developed by our people in our own local context. But what are we doing about it? Are we developing the research protocols by ourselves? Are we actually designing the study endpoints and establishing what they need to be and how they need to be? Because those are critical bits that we need to move into. So the victim mentality is about apportioning blame to another person, but rather than that, we need to now take responsibility, be responsible, and ask ourselves, what can we do to move the wheel from where we are to the next frontier? And that is a higher level of accountability and commitment to doing something beyond just talking about it. The dynamics, the challenges will always be there, and all of us will talk about the challenges that are there. But unless we do it, we will keep blaming others, keep pointing fingers, but the solutions are not coming through blaming and through pointing fingers. So we need to get to the point where we are not victims of our circumstances. It is us designing and actually drafting that solution. There's an article that I read a while back, I think that was early this year or late last year. It was about whether you need to be angry or you need to be sad. At the moment, most of us are angry. But we're angry because we are apportioning blame, and therefore we have somebody to be angry at. But we need to be sad because the dynamics of how everything is not how we wish it to be. But at the same time, by being sad, we take up responsibility and accountability and ask ourselves, what do I need to do as David to move us from where we are to a better future? And what does that better future look like? Then we start having a conversation of development and progress rather than a conversation around apportioning blame and pointing fingers on who is failing who and why things cannot happen the way they need to be. That is not the conversation that we need to have. And therefore, there's need for a mindset shift in terms of moving from victims to actually the real actors. We need to be the protagonists in our own stories. In that case, then we'll be able to move forward. Another key thing is the fear of the unknown. Some of the conversation that we're talking about is about what possibilities are there, what can change. Some of them are unknown and untested. But as much as they are untested possibilities, the only way to verify and actually ascertain whether they are working or not working is by doing it. So if we keep fearing the unknown, chances are we might never know the known. We might never establish new ways of thinking, new knowns. And therefore we need to start doing something at this very moment as much as we can. So we need to change the unknown to known by doing the work. So that fear, yes, we know we are fearful. We need to have a balance in terms of what is our safe zone and how far are we willing to go into the unsafe zone. Uncharted territories we need to move in, but at the same time we need to have a proper buffer. The question is what that balance is going to look like. And one of the key things that I believe is going to be our best buffer is working as consortiums, as networks, as a group of professionals who are willing to take chances, but we're taking chances knowing that somebody will hold our hand when we fall deeper or when we need that additional guidance. And that is one of the key bits that we've been trying to do within African Pharmaceutical Network, establishing that platform where we can engage with peers and actually industry leaders And as we keep that engagement, we are tapping into your capabilities, but at the same time, we're offering something that you lack, something that you need support on. So in that case, then we're able to move forward to a common future together. That is critical for us so that we work against the fear of the unknown by establishing the knowns, but having a buffer and a support system that can make us realize the possibilities that are out there. Then the other key thing is the lack of the requisite motivation. What are the key motivators that we know in life? They're all either positive or the negative motivators. The positive motivators need to be what possibilities lie out therein that you can harness and be better at. And one of the bits that I've noted is I was reading How to Lead by David Rubinstein. And in a story that has been presented by Indra Nooyi is about how do you expect somebody to be a better person if they've never seen what that better looks like. So we need to have more role models and more leaders taking up leadership and actually presenting what possibilities are out there. And in so doing, then we'll be moving to a next frontier. So the lack of intrinsic and actually requisite motivation, there's that motivation in terms of the possibilities. Can we present possibilities by seeing what has happened in other countries, looking at case studies, present them in a contextualized manner that we can actually concretize and take up learning points and implement solutions in our case. That would be the first thing. That is about getting the external motivation in terms of what possibilities, what are the wins that we can achieve. Then the other bit is in terms of the negative motivation. The negative motivation, I think we have sufficient enough for now. In terms of, even today I was reading the dailies. Doctors are not, we have more than 4,000 doctors that are employed. How are we going to deal with such kind of challenges? It's by creating new avenues. The pain is already there, but we don't need to go to the very safe domain by crying and sitting back. We need to do something radical. We need to push ourselves beyond the boundaries. And that is a motivation enough. So we need that kind of motivation. That kind of motivation needs to be channeled and directed. By channeling and directing it is by knowing, because of these challenges, where can we go? How can we go there? And somebody needs to offer that guidance and that leadership. And some of the key people who can do that is ourselves, by actually seeing what can we do and how do we do it. And as I've mentioned, Africa Pharmaceutical Network, one of the key bits we're hoping for is we can work together. We can shape a future and craft a path. And that path can be the path that actually shapes the trajectory and the future of how the pharma industry in Africa develops and actually grows to build the future that we hope for. And in that case, then I believe the bit of our things, how things are, we know where the challenges are, we know what possibilities are there, but we also know how we can move there. The missing gap, as it is execution. And the question is, are you going to be the person who is going to execute and deliver on these solutions? Or are you going to be the person who points fingers and becomes a victim in your own life story? Are you going to be the people who are going to sit back and say, we were not enabled enough or not supported enough, there's some kind of disparities? Yes, we are marginalized. That is a fact of life. But as much as we are marginalized, we can change the story by doing something beyond the norm. And one key bit, last week I was watching some videos, I was learning, the fruits, all of us want the fruits of success. And the fruits of success are sweet. But the only way to harness and actually harvest the fruits that we hope for is through execution. You'll never harvest from a tree that was never planted. You'll never be a professional unless you are trained to be a professional. You'll never get a salary if you're not employed. You'll never be employed unless you're qualified for the job. So you need to start by executing, doing what needs to be done, and by doing, you're positioning yourself to be able to harness the possibilities and actually harvest the fruits of that labor and that toil. So there's no fruits without execution. The fruit is in the execution. Are you willing to execute? Are you willing to do what needs to be done? If you enjoy this kind of conversation, this kind of engagements, I'll be glad to keep engaging. Let's keep the conversation going. Hit the subscribe button. Let's engage, learn, build the network. And most importantly, you have a comment that you need to share with us in terms of a perspective shift, something that we feel we need to discuss again. Share it with me on the comment section. If you feel like there's a topic I need to talk about, please share those so that I can talk about it and present additional insights that we can learn from. And most importantly, share this information with your networks, and let's grow a movement that is going to shape the future of the pharmaceutical industry. Thank you so much, and let's engage again next Sunday.